your host here at Radical Talks, and I'm a partner at Radical, where we invest in AI startups. I am very excited for today's episode. We are going to dive into an idiosyncratic, sometimes mysterious, and undoubtedly fascinating and important business at the center of AI and software today, and that's a company called Palantir. Palantir is a software company. The company's software platforms power real-time decision-making across enterprise and government use cases. Today, the company is heavily focused on AI with its enterprise AI platform, AIP, which helps customers build enterprise-specific agents and applications. Palantir was founded in 2003, and the company joined the S&P 500 in 2024. So it's been on quite the journey, and on quite the journey recently, too. The stock is up an amazing 1,700%. It's a big number. Since it debuted on the New York Stock Exchange in September 2020. We have a very special guest today, and that guest is Ted Mabrey. Ted is the head of Palantir Commercial. He is a longtime Palantir executive. He just showed us his 10-year pin behind him that's hanging behind him right now. It's actually a sash. We're going to maybe make him put it on later. He's played a leading role in developing the company's commercial business, including platforms like Foundry and more recently its AI platform, AIP. Though Palantir's origins were in federal, the commercial business has been an incredible engine for the company over the past several years, and Ted has really been at the center of that story. Ted has also had a unique vantage point as an early Palantir employee to what is today an almost $450 billion market cap public company. On a personal note, Ted is my brother-in-law. So we have a lot of conversations like this over the dinner table when we're not wrangling Ted's 3 little kids. I'm excited to bring the discussion to the podcast. And as an added benefit, my parents may finally understand both of our jobs. Or not. We're going to find out. Let's see how we do. So I want to start at the beginning. You've been at Palantir for 15 years. I want to hear a little bit about the origin story. So paint a picture for us. How and why did you join? And what was the company like in those early days? I'd love to hear a little bit about how your sense of what Palantir is building has evolved as the company's transformed.
Yeah, so I didn't join at the very beginning, but joined in 2010. And I'd been working, I kind of had my first job out of school in financial services. That was kind of a job where I learned to put my pants on, but maybe not much else. And I was looking for something to figure out kind of what I was going to do, explore a lot of different things. And I wish that I could say that I had kind of rational wisdom about joining Palantir and what I believe in and doing it. But actually, I think the 2 things that really stood out to me, one is I had a friend at Palantir who I greatly respected and am very appreciative of having getting me a job, in part because I think I was rejected several times through the interview process. So thank you, Christina. But the 2 things that really stood out to me through that process of meeting a lot of people at Palantir was kind of a vibe. And there were 2 specific things that I still remember. One is the sense of purpose. So I'd been coming from financial services where everything that I'd kind of learned, and I'd gone to Princeton, and like what people were doing with jobs was about kind of climbing a ladder and extracting things from a job. It's your next promotion, your next bonus, your next job, your exit opportunity, and just this visceral sense of meeting people at Palantir who were building something and didn't think about that stuff at all. And it was quite striking and jarring, honestly, in a good way. And then the second was just the rate of change. So through interview process, like they reconfigured the kitchen and there were a different set of things. And so I think the kind of like dynamic set of people with significant purpose was just like, I'd have no idea what I'm getting myself into. I'm not a software engineer by training. The website had a banner that said, "We only hire software engineers." So, but there wasn't necessarily any rational thing other than this seemed like something that was going to be fun to get involved in. And then in terms of kind of what we're building and how it's evolved over time. I think a lot of the story of Palantir, especially on the commercial side of things, is that it was like a very long gestation period in order to get to a point where we are today, where we are winning in like every objective measure. And but at the beginning, it's like certainly not that, and certainly through my tenure was not like that all along. I think the kind of interesting part about it and kind of things that have changed and stayed the same is a lot of what we were doing was basically going on site with customers, figuring out what they need to do in order to achieve their jobs, and realizing just how poorly they were served by software and technology. And also how everything that in theory ought to be set up to help them to improve, to kind of compound the use of technology, to achieve their missions really was just like not getting any better. And so what we're basically signing up for is like, can you use technology to make really important problems and can you solve them? And then always kind of in the back of my head, this question of like, okay, we can do this, we did this, but like, what's it add up to from a business perspective? Where's it going to go? Like for most of my time at Palantir, if you had like a straight line extrapolation of like, this is what we're doing today, what would the business look like? It would have added up to zero for the majority of my time, which is like actually a pretty significant amount of time. But underneath the hood on that, kind of the rate of change, let's call it the second derivative of we're doing this, we're getting better, we're productizing this, we're internalizing this, like we're sort of building this foundation of strength that then really continues. And I think that's also why we've been able to continue to surprise people now and hopefully will into the future, continuing to have that second derivative and kind of the culture and how we think about products and the things that we build, where we're just building future strength today that is constantly undervisualized by everyone who kind of looks and analyzes us from the outside.
Yeah, really interesting. And I want to pick up that point on culture and values, vibes, as you framed it, when you were first encountering Palantir. So Palantir is decidedly different, defiantly non-normative company. And the company was built on a very particular belief system. How would you articulate what that belief system is and why do you think it's important?
Yeah, there's probably three components to it. I think the first order one, maybe the most foundational, is like you use the word belief and kind of having the idea that it is okay, actually it's necessary to believe in something, and that actually like belief in something is good, is the source of things that are righteous. And when we think about who we hire, it's like, do you have the capacity to believe in anything? That is actually kind of a more scarce skill set capacity than you might imagine, as you know, we have increasing secularism, increased professionalization, increased like training to not believe in things. So I think the first order thing is, yeah, belief is a key word. Like we believe in what we're doing. You have to believe in it. We want to hire people who are capable of believing in things. And that is one of the foundational parts of the culture. The second thing is like, okay, well, what do you believe in? I think one thing that we structurally believe in that's pretty ubiquitous is we believe in our technology and really technology writ large, its ability to impact fundamental societal issues in ways that have material fundamental impacts. So a wild optimism on just how important technology can be. And I think that optimism versus cynicism is one of the things that stands out about Palantir, where I have lots of critiques of generally the technology industry, but a lot of it is like business models that are built on cynicism, where it's like, this is how you would go to market if you don't think that your technology can be even more valuable tomorrow than it is today, or that you can't sign up for an end outcome that actually matters. So how do I build layers of obfuscation to hide myself from it? And our view on that is like, no, this should sign up for something that really materially matters. And it should matter against societal questions that are not trivial and on the side, but are foundational. Like if I want more security, I also want more privacy. If I can offer both of those things, then I'm creating net positive value for everyone. I improve politics, I improve everything about how it goes. And so just a fundamental belief that tech can really matter. And then maybe the third category of it is then also believing that everyone gets to believe a lot of different things too. And so I think to work at Palantir, you probably have to believe that kind of the broader project of the West or of the United States and the West is something that is worth investing in and enabling. That's probably a non-negotiable. Everything else underneath it is a lot of very heterogeneous belief structures, a lot of conflict internally around those things, a lot of debate, a lot of rigor around them. It's certainly not a monoculture from that perspective, but that belief in what we're doing is intrinsic to kind of the whole foundation of the place is definitely true.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, some of the things I'm hearing, it's missionaries, not mercenaries, which, as you said, there's actually a lot of mercenaries in the world of technology and sometimes in Silicon Valley in particular. So I think that is one really important point. Techno-optimists, so fundamentally optimistic about the impact and direction of technology, and then independent thinkers, people who are willing to debate, think independently, and think from first principles. Is that a fair articulation?
I would say that is a fair encapsulation, and then maybe two interesting nuances around it is like techno-optimist and techno-skeptic. You know, in both of those things, it's kind of a holding the contradiction of like tech ought to matter, but oftentimes it doesn't. Then the first principles and a lot of the like interesting things that define the culture is it is first principles, and we have leaders, and it's like we like to describe ourselves as an artist colony, but it's not a hippie commune. It's like it's an artist colony that wins, and there are times when it looks much more like a dictatorship than it does a hippie commune. And finding that balance of like how do you take these principles and use them to win and like really hold a high bar for what winning means is where a lot of the art of it comes.
An artist colony that wins. It's an awesome framing. And maybe I want to pick that up and talk about how you structure yourselves as an organization, what this actually means and translates to from an organizational perspective. We talked about this just before we started recording this call of Palantir is famous, infamous for this non-traditional culture, but also its non-traditional organizational structure. So titles are much more fluid. The org chart maybe looks different than a typical software company, certainly, but a typical enterprise for sure. And I like this quote from the Palantir S1 from Alex Karp's letter that I'll read aloud and speaks to culture and organization. And so I quote here, "The culture of our company is more than a mere byproduct of the people that we choose to hire. Our culture and means of organizing ourselves are preconditions for the creation of effective software." So talk to us a little bit more about that. What defines Palantir's organizational culture, and why does it matter for creating effective software, to use Karp's framing?
Yeah. It's such a hard thing to try and say like what defines it, because maybe what defines it, I guess, is like it's just a series of contradictions. And so if you wanted to have this is how you do it, this is how you might mimic it, or you have like generalized rules of like, this is generally how we build product, this is generally the division of labor, and then you back tested them on our most important products or how we're organizing against our most important missions, you would contradict that at any point in time. And so a lot of what the culture is, as you define it, is it like leans on and believes in individual humans and their individual like unique intuition, their unique taste, their ability to apply that over time. Like it's a constant change, set of contradictions, set of evolutions. And I think the reason that matters, if you then do look at these things empirically, is the opportunity for single individuals to have very unique impacts on the trajectory of Palantir, or like what that second derivative that I alluded to earlier is. Like it is just a continuous, over 2 decades, series of completely asymmetric, unique outcomes driven by individuals that would basically be impossible to replicate, even for those individuals at any given point in time. And so if that's true in sort of how this art is done, how we have like the tasteful creation of excellence over time, then you need to have an organizational structure that at first attempts to do no harm. And so there's all these things, for me in my role is like, I would love to make my job a little bit easier if we just had a little bit more organizational legibility, if we had a little bit more structure, a little bit more consistency in things without having to have like fire drills around them. But each one of kind of the implementations of how you might do that, how you might organize for consistency, control, repeatability, also has as a byproduct putting a ceiling on the creative output of the most talented people in the whole world. And that is criminal for us. Like that would literally destroy, or if you back tested it again, would destroy the enterprise value of our products and what we are today, and certainly will into the future. And so we really have to be very thoughtful about that, right? And again, it's like balanced with we're signing up for the highest stakes mission outcomes in the whole world for like life and death situations in both government and commercial domains on a regular basis. So we can't fuck up. Like there's no ability to do that. Yet we also have to presume that we need a culture that allows for that individual ingenuity, genius, etc. to happen. And it's kind of the management of that contradiction of it has to be perfect in the execution, and it has to be very, very paranoid about destroying the ceiling on creation that comes into like what's really hard about my job and more importantly Karp's job every single day.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there are a number of these contradictions. You have these incredibly important high stakes missions, as you identified, core enterprise tasks you're focused on, core national security missions that you're working on, this stuff really matters, right? So you can't mess it up, as you said. And you're a public company now. You're grown up. And so there is, to some degree, some structure likely that necessitates. And it strikes me that like a lot of this comes down to the people, just hiring super excellent, incredible people who can hold those contradictions together at the same time as you identify. This is a core part of being a Palantirian, being able to manage paradox and contradiction and navigate it and deliver in really high stakes context, right? It strikes me that a lot of this comes down to hiring excellent people. So we were going to talk about this later, but I want to pull it up and just talk about talent at Palantir. This is such an apropos topic right now. Palantirians are doing very cool things, and we'll talk about forward deployed engineers, but FDE is becoming this ubiquitous term and role in startups. And there's increasingly this consciousness of a Palantir mafia. We've got amazing founders coming out of the companies, Anduril, Hex, Nominal, Peregrine, all these things, investors, Joe Lonsdale, Gary Tan, amazing people coming out of Palantir. And I want to pull another Karp quote from a talk that you guys hosted recently, you and Karp, where he said, and I quote, "Palantir is the single most important organizer of talent in the Western world. The most important degree that you could possibly have. Whether you went to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or a school online, once you're here, you just went to Palantir," end quote. It's a really inspiring ethos, and it speaks to this incredibly high bar and need that you have for great talent. How do you guys think about this? What makes the company such a great development ground for talent? How do you hire and find these people? Would love to hear a little bit about how you've developed this Palantir Mafia and how you think about talent.
Yeah. Again, sort of infinitely dimensional. Maybe a few things that are interesting. One is, I think it is true because it has to be. And that is maybe a banality, but I think it is important, or I'd like contrast it versus the organizations that I deal with on a regular basis every day, where versus what we think we can do, which is basically like infinite optimism about how much we can impact humanity with our technology, and all that matters is how fast we get there. Like we think we've built 0.1% of what we have to build, and all that matters is at the limit is all that matters is the rate of innovation and the rate of creation in order to get there. And for every unit that we can pull that forward, we win. That means that this idea of you have to have the best people is not like everyone says they need to have the best people. We have to have the best people. And it's like, and we viscerally feel the opportunity cost on how fast we get to the future that we need to do if we don't have the best people. And where that manifests, like specifically, right, is like, why is that a trope? Is it we have about 4,000, maybe a little bit less people for a company of our size? That is bananas.
Totally.
We're also not intending to grow that number of people, right? Like there are easy ways for us to grow revenue in ways that would calcify and basically break the innovation engine that we need in order to keep moving. And again, for our business, the way we built it, what we're going after, the value of the next product completely dwarfs the value of the existing products. So all that matters is we have a culture that allows us to create the next product while winning enough along the way to get to that next product. That forces us to continue to hold this accountability where it's like it's so tempting because of the pain of managing the business this way to lower the ceiling on the next product, to put a little bit more structure in place, to scale through headcount, which means scale through repeatability. You're teaching people how to do what you already did. You aren't hiring people that have to create what you're not doing yet. Like all of these things are just fundamentally incumbent to the only way that Palantir works, which ultimately like drives back to that like, insane ambition and motivation in order to do those things. That also means that our people cannot be organized in a way where they are staff leverage to do work for people who are in charge of them. Every single one of them needs to be their own independent motor. And a lot of times when you allow everybody to be that independent motor, one is you will be surprised at how good they are and how like constrained many people are versus the talent that they have if you just give them a chance. Two, a lot of them are going to innovate in ways where they can learn completely different things. And so I think it's one that's then And then that all kind of compounds on itself, right? It's very attractive for the most ambitious people in the world, where it's now obvious that the Palantir degree is the most valuable degree in the world. It means we get the best people. It also means that we've gotten very good at managing and placing them and enabling them, where the Palantir mafia is exceptional. I would say second only to the people who've stayed, like the best people have stayed. And that is true in our results and in the aggregate now. And that forces us to continue again, like replenishing that culture, continuing to move. We're also very disciplined about, as people grow up, this all sounds really good and high and mighty, but what it is not, and I'd acknowledge, and is the opportunity cost of it, is it provides like very little reinforcement for things that a lot of humans need as they grow up. So it's like no title, infinite access, dip to prod in your first week, meet the CEO of a Fortune 10 company in the first month and own something for them. That sounds great at the beginning. It sounds a little less good when you're like, yeah, but now I've been here for a couple of years, where's my title? Like, it was great when none of my friends had titles and none of my friends had status and none of my friends had stature. Or I like needed to be able to explain it to my wife about what it is, or my mom, or whatever it is. And that we don't give you any of that. And then that either becomes something that you internalize as still really good for you as you get older, or it isn't. Right. And that's okay. And I think a lot of what companies will do is to start to say is like, well, the opportunity cost of losing someone means that I have to contort my organization to make it easy and safe to stay at every level. And then what you essentially end up with is a ceiling on people. You don't have people who continue to grow. They start to like harvest the things that they've done versus deal with that second derivative rate of change, pulling the future forward, which we all have to do every single day. And that's probably like the other thing that we're, for better and for worse, really disciplined about doing. And it either really works for you or it doesn't. And that's okay. There's only so many seats on the rocket ship.
And what does that translate to in terms of what motivates people to stay? Does it require that they are intrinsically motivated by the work? Does it go back to the belief system that we talked about?
I'll give you the autobiographical version. So I think there's two parts of it. One is with every unit of success, our like access and the type of things that we're working on and the importance and their importance on humanity and the country like grows in import as well.
Yeah.
And so you have the true thing that's very hard to pick up a newspaper and not see something that we're working on where we have like close to a deciding role on success or failure of the thing. And so that is, in some ways, it's like incumbent on responsibility and motivation, and you get a lot for free with that external stuff. But I think maybe the deeper one of like is, how much do you want to force yourself to continue to be in a position where you have to learn things that you don't want to learn? And, my kind of internal statement on this is everyone we hire at Palantir knows how to ace a test. It's like not that interesting. I can study for it. I can ace the test. The people who really thrive are the ones who are capable of learning things that they don't want to learn. And that usually means that you have to like question yourself emotionally. You have to like examine yourself and learn things about yourself that you don't want to learn, you have to learn things about the world, about how it works and how you want it to work, and how someone you respected told you it works is not actually how it works. Those are very difficult things to go through. But they are intensely rewarding too on the other side, right? So if I look at the intrinsic value of Ted Mabrey after 15 years, like what are the things that I value most about the experience? It's the accrual of all of those things where it's like, I would never have learned this if I was not forced to. And I was forced to, and I was motivated enough because I cared about this really impactful thing that was going to matter in the world. Able to like build the emotional discipline to be able to learn those things that question your ego, and then you can continue to move forward. And then it's like, and how long do you want to do that? Right. And not everyone wants to do that forever. It's like very fucking hard.
Yeah.
And at some point you just want to be the boss and tell people what to do. You don't get that here.
Yeah. There's an imperative to learn. There is an imperative to seek truth, sort of, and to encounter truth, right? Like reality as it is, and to grapple with that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the way with what we're trying to do with our products, you have to be able to like hold this, again, internal contradiction of it's the best product in the world and it sucks. And those two things like have to be true. And our business is the best business in the world and it sucks. and you are the best at what you do in the world, and you suck at it because you're just there is infinite space and infinite opportunity. And again, being in that space, I think everyone would say they want to be in it, and then some people can be in it for a year, and some people can be in it for 2 years, and some people can be in it forever.
I want to do focus on one last organizational element before we talk about the business, because there's a whole lot there that I do want to talk about. And to this concept of mimicry that we spoke about, attempted Palantir mimicry, we see it a lot in Silicon Valley now. The most visible example, perhaps, is the once derided, now ubiquitous for deployed engineer, or FDE. And this was a role invented at Palantir. It very much, to me, feels like it's the hottest role in Silicon Valley these days. You have written a little bit about FDE washing, my words, not yours, or the misappropriation of the FDE. What actually defines the FDE model, in your view? And what do you make of the appropriation of Palantirisms, more broadly, Palantir mimicry, in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, it's like I have this, it's like this is what famous rock bands must feel like, when they start having tribute bands. And you have all the tribute bands, you're like, hey, it's kind of cool, they're playing my song. And then you're like, God, that fucking song sucks. Like, you're ruining it. You're doing it all wrong. You can't sing about Penny Lane if you don't know who Penny Lane was. But it's like a fascinating, just like very interesting experience. Yeah, probably for 15 years, called 12 of them. It's just like this thing I'm doing is completely derided, and now everyone and their mother is doing it. It's so interesting. The thing that I think I kind of go back to explain my view on it is, and why I'm sort of skeptical of the mimicry a little bit, is if you want to learn from Palantir, I wouldn't learn about things that we've materialized. I'd learn about the process that led to the materialization. And on FDE specific, you kind of have this almost industrial complex of content around it, and people doing it and writing about it. And what's so interesting for me, having been through all these phases, is it's a lot of these things, they're not wrong, but they're one part of the elephant. It's okay, yeah, that was done. We did it because we did it really differently across every phase. It was very different for Gotham. It was very different for Foundry. It's very different for AIP. The roles themselves famously actually mean nothing. We call them Echo and Delta internally. You ask Sham, why is it that? It's because I wanted a name that meant nothing, is literally the reason for it. And I think, it goes back to the inspiration for it, for CARP, came from observations of how fine, excellent French restaurants operate, with the wait staff being an extension of the kitchen, understanding those things. And so I would think that if you want to learn from us, my pithy thing would be go sit in a French restaurant, eat a really good meal and study it, more than read the this is how you should do it. Because the whole point is that it's not mimetic. And it's very ironic to have a role that is entirely non-mimetic then become this thing that is the most copied part of what we're doing. But for us, the French restaurant, I couldn't go to a French restaurant and learn anything about it, to be clear. The cordon bleu in the freezer would taste the same to me as the cordon bleu in Paris. And I say that because it's not a dimension that I can understand elite excellence in. But it is one that CARP could, right? It's okay, you can understand why this is different, and why the best one is better than the one that's almost as good. And what's the difference, and what makes the difference of the nuance of those things. And I would start with, and it's this, so this method of organizing for us is our way, with our specific people, of understanding how to generate exquisite excellence. And for us, it's so taste dependent. I don't know how, for even us, it's also space and time dependent, but without CARP, without Sham, I don't know how you'd even try to do some of these things, just because it's there's all these contradictions and taste and balance of the thing. And so I would say more is you're probably more likely to learn to think about where can I see excellence in the world? Where do you deeply understand it, and in a way where you're already in a standard deviation of excellence such that you can appreciate 3 standards of deviation of excellence? Learn about that and have that as the inspiration, because the way that you're going to organize and do this, build a company, is you're going to have to build something exquisite and excellent. This kind of also is financialization of tech, and this is a structural arbitrage to do this thing, because the services companies are bad. And it's like, yeah, but why is that the right way for you to build something exquisite and excellent? And I think that's the much more important and enduring part of it. And then interestingly is like, obviously I'd be the greatest advocate for FDE as like an organizing principle in the world for us. And then for another company, I have no idea, honestly. Is it, if it's driven by mimicry even a little bit, then obviously it's not going to work. If it's something where it's like driving exquisite taste to build something enduring, unique, and that will compound in its own direction, awesome. If it's a rejection of what everyone in Silicon Valley is telling you to do, it's more likely to work than if it's what they're telling you, like doing the thing they said to do.
The dogma is often wrong, and the dogma is often derivative, to your point. And so it's a really, I think, valuable set of advice, if harder to follow than just, here's how Palantir did FDE and here's how you can do it too, right? Like FDE for dummies.
I wish I could do it, but I'd be like, and then anyone who knows what we've actually done would be like, well, that wasn't true here, that wasn't true here, that wasn't true here, that wasn't true here. Because it's like, and just the sequence of taste, right? It's like, what contracts do you take on? Where do you overfit? Where do you underfit? What products do you build in the field? What products do you not build in the field? How do you organize around that? How do you do that for any duration of time? Can it work with what everybody wants from an organizational structure, clarity, organization? I don't know. But I think you only have a chance if you have the exquisite taste and then do it in a way that you can understand.
Yeah. I want to use that as a jumping off point to talk about the business. You talked about the parts of the market you're focused on, customers. I want to talk about the commercial journey for Palantir and maybe weave some of the product portfolio into this too. So, of course, very famously, Palantir began as a business focused on national security after 9/11. Today, the growth engine, hats off to you, is decidedly commercial, right? I mean, in Q2 this year, for instance, US commercial grew by almost 100%. Relative to the prior year, Q2 2024. I want to understand, what did you learn starting in federal that made this transition into the enterprise make sense? Maybe if you can track some of the product story along with this, Gotham, Foundry, AIP, there's something called ontology that you guys talk about all the time. So tell us a little bit more there.
Yeah. What we learned part, and then the literal trajectory, but I think that there are two things that having these kind of very different businesses under the same roof got you. The first one that you get for free from the national security context is a deep-seated accountability to the outcomes of the tech that your technology enables. And when you are sitting in a tent in Iraq and people are coming home or not, it just creates a fundamentally different, you hire different people, the accountability. It's not did your product work? It doesn't fucking matter. Right. And that we attempt to say, and you have to work at the same company with people who are doing that. You better give a shit as much as the people that you're sitting alongside and that you're next to in doing that. And I think that has been actually a huge source of alpha for us in commercial, because commercial is an easier place to make money, and thus most companies have zero vendors that are actually aligned with them, or no competent technology vendors that are actually aligned with their outcomes. And when you can show up and do that and really do it, not in pretend fake stuff that everybody sees through, but you can really align with the customer, it gives you a major structural advantage in basically N of one on the organizing principle, which frankly also bought us a lot of time, as it took a decade to mature the technology that's coming behind it. The second thing on the technology then point of view is you have a very interesting, if it's the future is here, not evenly distributed, where you have a different distribution of the future across government and commercial. And at any given point in time, in any given domain, one is going to be ahead of the other. So for instance, with AI and applied high stakes AI, the DoD was way ahead of commercial. And so it allowed us to build a ton of infrastructure and harden things that were necessary to make Maven work, that have been foundational in order to make give us just a yawning head start on doing this in the commercial domain. There are lots of things also where commercial companies can move a lot faster and innovate more, and we can bring that back into the government domain. And so you get this kind of very different innovation stimulus that enables you to do those things over time. How that's literally manifested to your question of it is, our initial product was Gotham, which you can kind of think as and now as it's evolved, is kind of like the Palantir platform. Gotham is like applied in the defense context. And then a lot of the kind of core technological principles, basically is like the foundation of Gotham is this idea of an ontology, which is if you're going to sign up for maximizing the real world outcomes of technology, you have to get as close to a live, living, breathing facility of what's going on in the world. And that's kind of an infinitely challenging technical problem that you can build into for infinity time, especially when you then model it not just as a representation of what it is, but you model the effects that you can impose on it. So like the rights being much more interesting. We have this like continuous learning of, in the government space, it was intel and operations. In the commercial space, it's analytics and systems of record transactions. But the traditional stacks just completely separate those two things. And your systems of insight and your systems of action are distinct technology stacks. In theory, when you aren't aligned with your customer, you come up with bullshit frameworks of like, I collect data, organize data, analyze data, and then act on it, without realizing that the like insight to action thing is actually like when you need to start. So if you build backwards from that, you build a very different technology stack. You're only forced to reckon with that if you're having to deal with those real world outcomes of what's going on. And then, so that's PG. In commercial space, then is taking that concept, which initially we were trying to do in commercial, is like literally take the literal technology and apply it in the commercial domain, where you have like success but not the scale. You have different data cadences, different complexity in data, or different dimensions of complexity, maybe more interestingly, and different rights. So then Foundry was sort of the initial commercial platform that, interestingly, we had our own wandering through the desert of like, God, the ontology thing is hard. Maybe we wouldn't have to do that initially with Foundry. And then just having to run headfirst into the wall of like, of course, we're going to have to. And then the ontology then forms the foundation of why we have been fortuitously just so ready for language models and AI, which is all of that infrastructure that is required to enable human thought and maximize automations of traditional software, then building in another primitive into that system. We're just way ahead on all of the infrastructure and decomp of even like what problems are worth solving, how do you solve them, are you afraid of all the infrastructure you have to build in order to do that? So that's AIP. And then Apollo, also interestingly underneath it, is basically like the engine behind the engine. In crass terms, you could say is like the engine behind the economics, where we have to deploy our software across thousands of heterogeneous environments, all clouds, on-premise, oftentimes disconnected environments, satellites, tanks, whatever it might be. And we need a software delivery infrastructure that enables our developers to operate like they're operating like simple SaaS context, but deploy it to all of these different things, which of course we only built because we internalized that pain of deploying our software ourselves and like realizing how important that was. It allows us to move fast.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about now Palantir in the age of AI. You alluded to it previously. All this hard work that you had done really uniquely prepared you for the advent of language models. Palantir as an organization moved very quickly after it was clear the GPT-4 moment had happened. We had this amazing technology, it was working super well. So I want to hear a little bit more about AIP, the insight behind the product, why you were so uniquely ready for language models. I also want to talk about this unique way you have of selling it through these boot camps. So tell us a little bit more about AIP.
Yeah, well, maybe working backwards from the boot camps. I think the thing that changed in the market with the kind of AI revolution is it completely reinvigorated the idea that technology can and ought to matter to mission outcomes. Like we kind of gotten in this doldrums of like adherence to like reference architectures, this kind of thing, and tech owned by a CIO and back office, and it's very hard to get people to envision is like tech could do a lot more. The magic of AI was started to then have people demand like, well, tech ought to matter a lot. If it can do this, tech should matter a lot more to me, to what I'm doing. If I'm underwriting insurance or manufacturing planes or discovering drugs, whatever it might be, like I should be getting way more lift. And that was a huge structural advantage for us because the more accountable you are, the higher the bar is, the more you demand it now, the more we are the only answer, the only game in town. And so the boot camp idea is to basically lean into that change in market perception of like this tech has to matter, like this tech ought to matter, more importantly, and it ought to matter now. And it's like, yeah, you are right, customer who demands that unrealistic thing. Let's materialize it for you in a day. And then also in terms of pressing advantage from like a raw business perspective, we're the only people with a product. And so the only way you can do it in 24 hours is if you have a product. We have the product and all the trade craft of like the earned lessons about like how to deploy tech in ways that matter, getting beyond like kind of the silly chat thing, which is like compelling in the consumer context and not very compelling in the enterprise context, and basically be able to like dramatically move that. The other thing that I think is really important in the bootcamp motion is when you can deliver at pace, it starts to unlock non-technical people who really understand their domain to demand more from technology. And for us, that's like a very, very much sweet spot version. And both tactically of like, well, we can actually move at that pace, and strategically of like pull in the future to the thing that I was talking about. And so it's just much easier. AI, especially as brand new technology, technology has to be experienced. We're competing against basically like people extracting money without products and filibustering customers. Like, let's spend 6 months getting AI ready. Like, let's do these pilots that obviously aren't going to end up in any value because there's no rigor in the scope or technology to deliver them into any context. And so how do you compete with that? Not by talking, but just by showing it. And it's been a huge accelerant for us where it's like, anytime someone wants to talk, we say, it's like, we'll talk to you once, we're going to show you next. And that's working exceptionally well.
Really cool. I know we just have a couple minutes left. I have a few more things I want to get to. I want to hear you talk a little bit more about Palantir as a platform. You talked a lot about the greatest days of the product and of the technology should always be ahead of it. You have said that the next great businesses will be built on Palantir. You see the company as the next AWS. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Well, it comes down to, again, kind of the first sort of thing is this balance between optimism and cynicism, and thinking about like how much technology can matter. And the more optimistic you are, which would be my kind of definition of the next Palantir, is that it is defined not by like a structural arbitrage of cynicism to extract rents in the present, but is to build technology into the future that will matter, like be the technology that matters most in the world. That the more you are aligned with that, one is the more likely you are to be the quote unquote next Palantir. And maybe there are other great companies to be built, but for us. And then also the more you realize that, of course, you should build upon, stand on the shoulders of the technologies that exist that have solved a lot of these problems on your behalf, oftentimes in ways that you can't quite perceive yet. And so one of the things that I think we're quite proud of, and you think about like all of the ex-Palantir mafia and these things too, is also just reestablishing like what are worthy companies to build, what are worthy technologies to build. And we have this kind of with our Foundry for Builders or Palantir for Builders program, the ones who do it are the ones who have this shared like dramatically ambitious optimism, and then the tech enables them to go much faster and reach much higher. And we are all for that because our version is like there is way, way more to be built on the foundation of what we've built than is available or that we are ever going to get to. And you can see that in like concrete ways with our FedStart program, basically unlocking the government compliance cycle for customers to be able to access that, but then with higher order primitives of we think the technology is the foundation for the AI age. If you're going to build a really meaningful AI company, you can either like be cynical and try and rebuild parts of it and kind of sell into the existing unambitious enterprise software stack, or you can go build things that are going to really matter. And we're pretty excited about the companies that are building the things that are going to really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Another former Palantirian, Trey Stevens, has the essay that he wrote of pick good quests, choose good quests. And it's to this point, and it's one of my favorite essays for this reason, right? And part of the insight behind choose great quests is the quests need to be suited to the founder and to the organization. It's the same concept of, that we've talked about in this conversation about not every organization should have FTEs, right? There is like this finding your penny lane, singing your own song is part of choosing a great quest and building a great company.
Yeah, having the philosopher founder, one of the first quote in Karp's book is from Goethe's from Faust, And it's, you will never touch the heart of others if it doesn't emerge from your own heart. And I'd like deeply internalize that. It's like, what is worth you doing, and then do it in your way. And I hope that our success motivates people to operate that way versus trying to conform into some structure that someone else told them they had to.
Yeah. Two concepts I want to fuse are two TED-isms. One is software industrial complex, which you've written a little bit about this, and we've talked about today, this notion that SaaS ushered in this era of a software industrial complex, this proliferation of rigid, low-quality software that actually didn't do much in terms of productivity gain, actually just from a macro perspective, literally, but also more practically from an enterprise perspective. Enterprises weren't getting outcomes, right? So I want to talk about the software industrial complex. If you can connect it to TEDism 2 of the cybernetic enterprise, so this vision of AI enabling operational steering, I'd love to hear about those two ideas.
Yeah, I'll give you our version of A Good Quest.
Yes.
I agree on is like a really awesome essay, and if you haven't read it, you should read it. You micro and macro in the software industrial complex from my own experience. One on the macro, right? Like software ate the world. Total factor productivity is below trend line. Life expectancy hasn't gone up. Real wages haven't gone up. Like, what's going on? There are lots of, I'm not going to get into like a macro, like pin the blame on like, what happened in 1972 or whatever. But if it was so good, then these things couldn't be true. Or like, tell me something that we ought to measure that shows that this stuff actually fucking matters. Market cap's gone up. Somehow the world has not. And that seems to be like, hey, let's wrestle with that. Micro, all the time I spend is, and have spent for 15 years, is on site watching people in the real economy do their jobs and figure out, is technology helping them or is it hurting them? And one of the striking things that you see over and over again is that no matter the software stack, or like have you adopted every last marginal popcorn brand of SaaS to have like the colorful logos in your stack, is like they're all the same. Like the problems persist that matter to the business. And so you get this kind of like way to move the on-premise architecture to the cloud. You have new businesses, you have new economics for the software companies. The businesses are still largely the same. Or like show me, real world businesses that have had differentiated competitive advantage emerge from this technology. Is anybody even trying to sell that? Or it's like the whole business model that is informed. This is where like the industrial complex comes in of like, who gets funded? What's the valuation? What are the analysts like? What do the analysts who describe the industry, the analysts on Wall Street like? And it's like, this illusion of zero marginal cost scales, things that sail infinitely on paper and not infinitely in practice. And you end up with basically a parasitic relationship between everybody building technology and the end state of what it adds up to. And, that's obviously like provocative and argumentative, but I've just seen it 1,000 times. Then, our version of the Good Quest for the cybernetic enterprise is that part of the reason with that is that like the mission is this kind of cynical, like carve out some part of the technology stack and extract high margin revenue from the company into the parasite. And it's not thinking about like, hey, how do I catch this? What does this add up to? Like, how should I be thinking about what technology does for my business? And kind of the idea of cybernetics has been around for a long time. We've said like some like in our very kind of wonky academic culture, it's something where people like do a lot of reading around these things. But like my version of it would be is the more that you can weave technology into the like direct core achievement of your mission, the more it's going to benefit you. The easiest examples of this are the consumer internet, right? It's like your product, your data, your intelligence, AI, and or otherwise, like they're all woven together. Every time you use Google search, it improves page rank. Netflix algorithms, news feeds, TikTok reels, like they are cybernetic enterprises. And then we describe them as like the best businesses in the history of the world from an economic perspective, and de facto monopolies because you have compounding returns on those things. But from a kind of a technology point of view, they're also in some ways very simple. Right? You have like very simple data models, very simple interaction methods, web scale interactions to be able to extract value from like incremental marginal algorithmic improvements. But why couldn't we take that or like that concept to much more complicated distributed global supply chains with manufacturing, regulatory compliance, like safety, et cetera? You're trying to do the same thing, right? Like you would write down, this is a human created organization. This is what it's trying to do. These how these things work together. but it is so analog. It's like I have 85 different systems, 800 different systems. I have all of this human glue around them in order to make them work. And so you don't have kind of that technology, software-defined, software-enabled view. But if you can achieve it, you can kind of create that harness. One, I think you're going to win. And then two, you also have the benefit of riding the CapEx wave of trillions of dollars going into like creating better and cheaper intelligence. And if you position yourself correctly, while all of that spend is happening, you're going to be capturing all of the economic surplus of what it does by dominating your industry. So kind of that software-defined cybernetic enterprise that tastefully does the engineering of human ingenuity, traditional software, and AI together, those companies will win. I suspect they will be as asymmetrically successful as the dominant consumer internet giants, but in every industry under the sun.
Really, really interesting. Last question. We've gotten through this whole conversation with no token, which is impressive. For a conversation about Palantir, I mean, maybe the whole conversation has been about token because it's one about Palantir, but the quote that you often use to talk about the Palantirian arc and others have used is from the Tolkien poem, and it's "Not all who wander are lost." It strikes me that this is particularly well suited to this arc we've talked about, a business model and practices and ideology even that was derided to this enormous success story, right? Pretty unquestionably enormous success story. What do you make of that arc? Tell us your take on the Tolkien.
Yeah. I do. I love the quote. I have it above my son's crib. It resonates very deeply with me. I go back to maybe the beginning of the conversation and this idea of belief and what looks like wandering. Everything meaningful that you really believe in is your method of delivering this exquisite excellence in domains that matter to you. Has to look like wandering for a while, would be my guess, if it's going to be meaningful. If I think about it with our own journey, right, it certainly looked like wandering. I think along the way, most of the time is I have no idea where we're going to end up. But the purpose in the journey was certainly there. It's kind of God, if we don't do this, who will? If we can't pull it off, who will? It's worth it. Keep doing it. That's probably the thing that I would hope is, it was what to take away from Palantir, people starting doing things is having the courage to go on your own journey. I suspect that you're going to create companies and products that impact the world a lot more than figuring into the market map slice of this is how the AI stack has been carved up already. Kind of anybody on there is probably going to go to zero. Do something that you care about and see where it goes.
Choose a good quest. Not all who wander are lost.
Yeah,
yep. Well, I think that's a perfect place to end it. Ted, thank you. So appreciative. This has been phenomenally interesting and awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for Radical Talks this week. If you had as much fun as we did, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you for future episodes. See you then.